comes a moment in every empath's life when the silence inside them becomes deafening, when the kindness they've given so freely begins to taste like poison, when the smile that once healed others starts to feel like a mask that's suffocating their soul. It doesn't happen overnight. It builds quietly, invisibly, in the spaces between forgiveness and exhaustion, between compassion and collapse. Jung warned that what does not come to consciousness returns as fate, and for the empath, that fate is the explosion no one ever sees coming. Because the empath breaks differently. They don't scream, they don't rage, they implode. After years of absorbing other people's pain, they reach a point of psychic saturation, a psychological breaking point where empathy becomes rage, kindness turns into numbness, and understanding transforms into a cold, cutting clarity. This is not the loss of compassion. It is its transmutation. It's the moment the empath stops bleeding for the world and begins to see how the world mistook their bleeding for weakness. Syphoria begins here, the psychological dissonance of awakening after years of servitude to everyone else's emotions. You feel it the moment you realize that your gentleness has been exploited, your forgiveness weaponized, your patience mistaken for permission. You see the faces of those you carried, how they thrived while you withered, how they expected you to understand but never once tried to understand you. Jung would call this the shadow's revolt, the buried self rising to demand justice after years of repression. The explosion doesn't come from hatred. It comes from imbalance. It's the soul's final defense mechanism against psychic depletion. Mindset shifts violently in this awakening. For so long, you believed empathy was your highest virtue. You thought compassion could save everyone if you just gave enough, tried enough, understood enough. But you begin to see the truth. Empathy without boundaries is self-annihilation. It is moral suicide disguised as nobility. You start to realize that the world doesn't reward goodness, it consumes it. And that to survive, your empathy must evolve from submission into discernment. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." You now see how your unconscious need to be needed created your own suffering. Belief fractures, but in that fracture, truth is born. You no longer believe that being good means being available. You no longer equate love with sacrifice. You stop idolizing your ability to endure pain and start questioning why you normalized it. This is the birth of the empath's rebellion, not against others, but against the self-destructive patterns disguised as virtue. You realize that some people do not want healing, they want hosts. They feed on the light of those who do not yet know how to protect it. And for years, you were their willing altar. Clarity burns away illusion. You see the patterns for what they are, the takers who mistake your empathy for consent, the manipulators who exploit your silence, the wounded who refuse to heal but demand your endless understanding. You see how your empathy became your leash, how your compassion chained you to other people's chaos. And the moment that clarity hits, something sacred dies. The version of you that thought love meant caring everyone. Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. And this is your pain, the recognition that you built your identity on serving a world that never once served you." Vision expands as the smoke clears. You begin to see yourself not as the healer of others, but as the guardian of your own energy. You realize that your light was never meant to illuminate everyone. It was meant to guide those ready to walk beside you. You start to see that empathy, when aligned with awareness, becomes power, not servitude. The explosion, though violent, gives birth to a new kind of strength, the empath who has finally learned to protect their own soul. Purpose crystallizes through contrast. The pain you carried was not meaningless. It was the fire that forged discernment. You begin to see that empathy was never meant to be your prison. It was meant to be your instrument. The world does not need you to bleed, it needs you to lead. But you cannot lead when your energy belongs to everyone but yourself. Jung's archetype of the wounded healer transforms here. You are no longer the one who suffers for others. You are the one who teaches others how to stop suffering. Discipline becomes sacred. You build boundaries like fortresses, not out of anger, but out of reverence for your energy. You learn to say no without guilt, to withdraw without explanation, to protect your silence as fiercely as you once gave your understanding. You train your mind to discern between compassion and compulsion. You stop absorbing energy as if it were empathy and start channeling it as awareness. This is the discipline of the evolved empath. To feel deeply, but respond strategically. Action becomes refined. You no longer rush to fix, soothe, or explain. You watch, you listen, you choose. Every act becomes deliberate, rooted in clarity, not obligation. You stop reacting to pain and start transmuting it. Where you once absorbed energy unconsciously, you now wield it consciously. Where you once sought peace by pleasing others, you now create peace by aligning with yourself. Gratitude softens the edges of your transformation. You no longer resent the years you spent overgiving. You see them as initiation, the trials that taught you discernment. You thank the people who drained you because they revealed the leaks in your spirit. You thank your exhaustion because it forced you to rest. You thank the explosion because it freed you. Gratitude becomes the alchemy that turns bitterness into wisdom. Adaptability replaces fragility. You can now move through life without absorbing every vibration around you. You can feel chaos without becoming it, witness suffering without inheriting it. You no longer see detachment as coldness, but as maturity. Adaptability allows you to exist in a world that feeds on emotion without becoming its meal. You bend without breaking, care without collapsing, love without losing yourself. Resilience blooms in your silence. You no longer explain your distance. You no longer justify your peace. You understand that evolution doesn't require validation. The empath's explosion is not the end, it is the rebirth of sovereignty. You are no longer controlled by the unconscious patterns that once ruled your life. You are conscious now, aware of where your energy flows, aware of who deserves it, and aware that empathy is a privilege, not a promise. Learning becomes infinite. Every interaction becomes a study in energy, every silence a meditation, every ending a lesson in discernment. You begin to understand that not everyone who crosses your path is meant to be healed by you. Some are meant to awaken you. Jung said, "The gold is in the dark." You realize now that the darkness you once feared, your anger, your exhaustion, your boundaries, was the gold all along. The explosion was not destruction, it was revelation. And as you step fully into this awareness, the world looks different. You are no longer the empath who suffers silently. You are the empath who sees clearly. You walk through life as an instrument of perception, no longer absorbing, but reflecting. Your empathy no longer costs you peace. It amplifies your power. You are no longer defined by how much you give, but by how consciously you give it. The explosion no one saw coming has already happened. It was not chaos, it was rebirth. You have become the storm and the calm within it, the empath who feels everything but belongs to nothing, who loves fiercely but wisely, who gives generously but selectively. You have learned what few ever do, that to preserve your light, you must master your shadows. You are awake, you are sovereign, you are free. And now you finally understand Jung's warning that when the empath stops suppressing their own darkness, the explosion that follows is not the end of their compassion. It is the beginning of their power. And from that power, something extraordinary begins to unfold. You start to see that the explosion wasn't destruction, it was creation. It was your rebirth as a being of consciousness rather than compulsion, presence rather than performance. The empath who once apologized for existing now walks in quiet authority. You don't announce your transformation, you embody it. You no longer crave to be understood because you have finally understood yourself. The noise of validation has fallen silent, and in its absence you hear the sound of your own soul breathing again. Cyphoria turns to clarity. The emotional noise that once drowned you is now background static, barely noticeable against the symphony of your awareness. You begin to feel a serenity that has weight, a peace that feels earned, not borrowed. Jung said, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. You no longer deny your anger, your fatigue, your limits. You have integrated them. Your shadow stands beside your light, and together they form your strength. Your mindset transforms from survival to mastery. The empath you once were survived by pleasing, enduring, and explaining. The empath you are now thrives by observing, choosing, and aligning. You no longer confuse sensitivity with weakness. You see it for what it truly is, advanced awareness. You perceive undercurrents others cannot see, patterns they cannot sense, truths they cannot face. What used to feel like a burden has become your greatest strategic advantage. You no longer absorb chaos. You read it. You no longer react to energy. You command it. Belief solidifies into knowing. You no longer believe you deserve peace. You know it. You no longer hope people will treat you with respect. You expect it. You no longer chase love. You emanate it. Your energy speaks before you do, and those who cannot match it will fall away naturally. The world you used to bend for now bends around you. You have become gravitational, not reactive. The empath who has found themselves becomes a quiet force that cannot be moved. Because they no longer fight against life, they move with it. Clarity now becomes vision. You begin to see your past not as wasted compassion, but as training. Every betrayal taught you boundaries. Every disappointment taught you detachment. Every heartbreak refined your discernment. You no longer fear loss because you've learned that everything taken from you was never truly aligned with you. You have learned to trust the pruning process of life, to understand that what falls away was never part of your becoming. Your vision expands into purpose. You now see that empathy was never meant to make you small. It was meant to make you aware of energy, patterns, human psychology, and the hidden language of emotion. You were never weak for caring. You were wise before your time. You simply hadn't yet learned that compassion without control destroys, but compassion with boundaries transforms. You now use empathy as an instrument, not an identity. You no longer are empathy, you wield it. Purpose deepens into direction. You stop wandering between other people's stories. You no longer feel responsible for their endings. You begin to write your own. The time you once spent rescuing others is now spent building yourself. Your focus sharpens into creation art, ideas, mastery, expression. Jung believed the individuation process. The journey toward selfhood was not a destination, but a continuous act of becoming. You are now living proof of that becoming. You create not to be seen, but because it is who you are. Discipline roots your freedom. You learn that boundaries are not built once, they must be maintained daily. You learn that peace is not found, it is practiced. You learn that energy, like wealth, must be invested wisely. Every no becomes a declaration of sovereignty. Every pause becomes an act of strength. Every refusal to overextend becomes a quiet revolution. Discipline, for the empath, is not rigidity, it is protection. It is the architecture that keeps your inner world from collapsing under the weight of external demand. Action becomes sacred. You move with deliberate energy, aware that everything you do ripples outward. You do not waste words trying to explain your value. You do not drain energy chasing what resists alignment. You act only from awareness. When you walk into a room, you do not adjust your frequency to match it. You hold your vibration and let the room rise to meet you. That is what it means to have mastered empathy, to be aware of every frequency, but enslaved to none. Gratitude becomes your constant companion. You look back at the ruins of your old life and smile, not with resentment, but reverence. You thank the nights that broke you, the people who drained you, the moments that humiliated you. Each was a necessary demolition, clearing the ground for this version of you to emerge. Gratitude keeps your power soft. It prevents wisdom from hardening into cynicism. It allows you to stand strong without closing your heart. Adaptability becomes your elegance. You flow through situations that once consumed you. You bend around confrontation without losing integrity. You navigate manipulation with calm precision. You have learned that the ultimate flexibility is internal, to let life shape you without shattering you. Jung believed the truly conscious individual could exist in contradiction, both soft and strong, detached yet deeply feeling. You have become that paradox. You are water and flame. Resilience becomes your quiet confidence. You no longer fear being misunderstood because you no longer require understanding. You no longer fear being alone because solitude has become your power source. You no longer seek validation because your peace validates itself. You walk through chaos untouched, not because the world has changed, but because your inner architecture no longer collapses under its weight. Learning becomes your life's rhythm. You absorb lessons effortlessly now because you have stopped defending the old self. You understand that growth is not self-improvement. It is self-remembering. Every experience reveals more of what you always were, beneath the conditioning, beneath the people-pleasing, beneath the masks. You have come home to yourself, and from this home you will build everything anew. And now you understand Jung's hidden message to empaths. The explosion was inevitable. It was the psyche's rebellion against unconscious martyrdom. The destruction you feared was simply the death of the false self, the one who believed peace could be earned through suffering. The explosion was not your undoing. It was your emergence. You are no longer the empath who breaks silently. You are the one who awakens loudly, without noise, without chaos, but through presence. You carry the weight of your own light with grace. You no longer chase healing, you embody it. You no longer seek love. You radiate it. And in that stillness, you finally see. The empath's explosion was not the end of their sensitivity. It was the birth of their power. It was the day they stopped dying for others and started living for themselves. It was the day their empathy became consciousness, their compassion became wisdom, and their pain became prophecy. You are awake, you are sovereign, you are free, and now you no longer fear the explosion because you are the fire that created it. And from the ashes of that explosion, a new kind of silence takes shape, not the fragile quiet of suppression, but the powerful stillness of alignment. You no longer apologize for your depth. You no longer dilute your presence to make others comfortable. You exist fully, unapologetically, and calmly in your truth. You have become something rare in a world addicted to reaction, a human being who no longer mirrors chaos, but absorbs it, studies it, and transmutes it into wisdom. The empath who has crossed through the fire no longer trembles at intensity. You have lived inside storms that others couldn't even name. You have carried the weight of invisible worlds, unspoken emotions, unhealed wounds, generational pain. But now, instead of carrying it, you convert it. You've become an alchemist of emotion. What once drowned you now fuels you. What once overwhelmed you now informs you. Every sensitivity that was once a weakness is now a tool. Every pain that once shattered you has become the architecture of your understanding. Syphoria now feels like peace. The psychological tension that once fractured you has dissolved into equilibrium. You are no longer split between giving and keeping, between compassion and exhaustion. You have found the middle, the space where empathy is not submission, but awareness. You have learned that the highest empathy is not the kind that absorbs pain, but the kind that sees through it. You can look at someone suffering without losing yourself inside it. You can love people fiercely without trying to rewrite their fate. This is your evolution the moment your heart and mind finally make peace with each other. Your mindset has evolved beyond kindness as an identity. You are no longer good because the world expects it. You are good because it is your nature, not your duty. You have learned that true goodness does not sacrifice itself for approval. It simply acts in alignment with truth. You do not rescue anymore, you reveal. You do not explain anymore, you embody. You no longer trade your peace for validation because validation has become irrelevant. What matters now is the quiet knowing that your energy, your love, your compassion, all of it are yours to direct. Belief has transformed into conviction. You no longer believe in your worth, you know it. You no longer hope people will see your value. You feel it radiating from within you. You no longer wait for reciprocity. You choose reciprocity. The empath who once sought approval through service now commands respect through presence. You understand that people no longer follow words, they follow energy. And your energy has become impenetrable, grounded, magnetic. Clarity becomes divine sight. You now see beyond surface emotion into structure, beyond words into motive, beyond pain into pattern. You understand how trauma hides behind charm, how need disguises itself as love, how manipulation dresses itself as care. You do not judge these things. You observe them. You are no longer reactive because you understand that human behavior is rarely personal. It is projection. You do not take it in. You let it pass through. Vision becomes legacy. You no longer dream of healing the world through suffering. You dream of raising consciousness through example. You embody what Jung described as the individuated self, one who is both shadow and light, instinct and awareness, human and divine. Your vision is not grandeur. It is simplicity. You do not want to save the world. You want to walk through it awake. Purpose becomes presence. You realize that your purpose was never a destination. It was a state of being. You are the purpose. Every act of mindfulness, every moment of silence, every choice to remain whole in a world built on fragmentation, that is your purpose. The empath who has mastered themselves becomes a quiet revolution. You do not fight darkness, you outgrow it. You do not destroy illusion. You simply stop feeding it. Discipline becomes serenity. You understand now that mastery does not come from suppression but from rhythm. You honor your needs as sacred rituals, rest, solitude, boundaries, reflection. You no longer see self-care as indulgence. You see it as maintenance of your sacred instrument, your mind. You realize that the more disciplined your energy becomes, the freer your soul feels. Freedom without structure is chaos. Empathy without boundaries is slavery. You now embody both freedom within form, feeling within control. Action becomes effortless. You do not chase alignment. You move from it. You do not overthink decisions. You feel their resonance. You no longer rush to fix, prove, or persuade. You know that truth does not need defense, it simply endures. You have become strategic with your compassion, economical with your words, intentional with your time. This is not coldness, this is wisdom. You have learned that to remain powerful, you must remain selective. Gratitude now feels like gravity, it holds you in your center. You are grateful not because life is easy, but because you can now see its design. You are grateful for every storm that exposed a false connection, every heartbreak that revealed your capacity to love, every ending that pushed you toward awakening. You no longer curse pain, you understand it as initiation. Gratitude transforms suffering into understanding, and understanding into peace. Adaptability becomes your genius. You can shift environments, people, energies, and never lose your center. You are no longer rigid in your definitions of love or meaning. You allow everything to evolve. You do not resist endings. You flow with them. Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." and you have. That acceptance gives you infinite flexibility. You no longer need the world to validate your transformation because you are already living proof of it. Resilience becomes your silence. You no longer prove strength by enduring chaos. You prove it by walking away from it. You no longer define power as resistance. You define it as awareness. You have learned that there is more power in stillness than in struggle, more courage in peace than in war. You no longer need the world to be quiet for you to feel calm. Your calm creates quiet. Learning has become second nature. You no longer resist lessons because you no longer fear loss. You have learned that the soul cannot be taken from, only revealed through experience. Every event now unfolds like a mirror, showing you more of yourself. You understand that wisdom is not collected, it is remembered. And now, as you stand in this new self-conscious, awake, whole, you understand Jung's warning in its full brilliance. The empath's explosion was never about destruction. It was about emergence. The empath who suppresses themselves for too long eventually detonates not in chaos, but in truth. The world calls it an explosion, but it is simply the soul reclaiming its territory. You have walked through fire and learned not just how to survive, but how to command it. You have learned that the explosion within was not anger, it was birth. You have seen that the quiet ones are not weak, they are dormant volcanoes, waiting for the right moment to reshape the landscape. And now, you are that landscape. You are the silence after the storm, the eye within the hurricane, the calm after centuries of noise. You have become the embodiment of Jung's greatest truth, that wholeness is not found in perfection, but in integration. You are awake. You are sovereign. You are free. And now, the world will feel your empathy not as sacrifice, but as power. Not as pain, but as presence. Not as softness, but as strength. You are the empath reborn. You are the explosion no one saw coming. And now you will live as the calm that remains when the fire becomes light. And so, in the quiet that follows everything you've endured, there is only stillness. Not emptiness, not the hollow quiet of defeat, but the sacred silence of completion. The world that once drained you now stands at a distance, small and harmless. The noise that once commanded your energy has dissolved into background hum. You breathe, and for the first time in your life, that breath belongs to you. You understand now what Jung meant when he said that there is no light without shadow, no awakening without descent. You have descended. You have seen the machinery of your own suffering, the gears of guilt, the levers of overgiving, the endless cycle of seeking peace in chaos. You have dismantled it piece by piece. And now from the wreckage you have rebuilt yourself, not as an empath who breaks, but as one who sees. You walk lighter, but you are not fragile. You care deeply, but you are not consumed. You love fearlessly, but you no longer confuse love with rescue. You have learned that strength does not roar, it simply endures. That peace is not the absence of emotion, it is the mastery of it. That compassion is not surrender, it is discernment. You are no longer trying to save anyone. You are showing them by your very being that it is possible to live without the chains of emotional servitude. You are no longer drowning in the waters of empathy. You have learned to breathe beneath them. You are the rarest kind of soul, the one who can stand in the center of the world's chaos and not lose their stillness. And when people come to you now, as they always will, they will feel something they cannot explain. Not your words, not your advice, but your equilibrium. The resonance of someone who has seen both heaven and hell within themselves and learned to call both home. Your presence will heal not because you absorb pain, but because you have mastered it. That is the true power of the awakened empath. Not the ability to feel everything, but the ability to feel everything and remain whole. Not the need to fix others, but the capacity to inspire them through your calm. Not the urge to carry the world, but the wisdom to let it find its own balance. And so you stand now quiet, luminous, untouchable, not bitter, not hardened, but awake. You understand that the explosion within you was never destruction. It was liberation. You are no longer the empath everyone expected you to be. You are the sovereign that Jung foresaw, the one who walks through shadow unafraid, who touches the wounds of the world and does not bleed, who holds empathy like a blade of light, precise, powerful, and sacred. You have transcended the burden of being understood. You have become understanding itself. You have stopped trying to heal the world because now you are the healing. You are awake. You are sovereign. You are free. And this time, no one will ever mistake your light for weakness again.